Alrighty, it is noon and we are recording. Hello and welcome back to Welty at Home, the slow reading virtual book club that alternates works by Eudora Welty with works by authors connected to Welty. Today, we will begin our series exploring two of Ross Macdonald's mystery novels, The Underground Man and Sleeping Beauty. We will read and discuss about half of each book each week and conclude our discussion at the end of the month on Monday, June 29th. My name is Anna Traylor, and I'm the Special Projects Coordinator at the Eudora Welty House and Garden. And we are grateful to Suzanne Mars, Eudora Welty's friend and biographer and Professor Emerita of Millsaps College, for guiding these discussions. First, some quick housekeeping. To comment or ask a question, click the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and select Raise Hand. If you're on a tablet or a phone, you may have to tap the screen for this option to appear. And a lively discussion often takes place in the chat as well. So be sure to glance over at that chat box every now and again. And I'll collect that weekly chat transcript to send with a newsletter at the end of the series. But if you would like access to the working transcript document, please reach out to me at info@eudoraweltyhouse.com. With that, Suzanne, would you like to begin today's discussion?
I'm going to start off by passing the baton to Beverly Fatherly. He's going to take my place today because I've just been to the eye doctor and my eyes have been dilated and I'm having a hard time seeing all of you clearly, and I certainly can't read from my notes very easily. So Beverly, my colleague from Hinds County Community College, the super docent at the Welty House, a longtime member of this group, is going to be leading our discussion. And along with Beverly, we have with us Tom Nolan, who is the biographer of Ross Macdonald, who is my co-editor on Meanwhile There Are Letters, and who is a mystery reviewer for the Wall Street Journal. So you're in good hands, not with Allstate, but with Beverly and Tom. I'm going to join in whenever I feel an irresistible urge to speak, but I'll try to stifle myself. Okay, Beverly, it's up to you.
All righty. Luckily for y'all, Suzanne gave me notes, so you won't have to rely totally on me. And Anna, I'm going to ask you to look for the hands to be raised because I'm on my phone and I can't see everybody as I would like to. So if you wouldn't mind just calling on people. Let me do a little quick introduction and then we'll ask Tom to jump in here a little bit and talk about this book from the standpoint of Ross Macdonald's biographer. As Suzanne writes, Ross Macdonald's 16th Lou Archer mystery was The Underground Man. There would be two more. The novel merited a review by Eudora Welty, published on the front page of the New York Times Book Review. What did the review say? You can read the review online in the Library of America's Welty Stories, Essays, Memoir volume, or in the Eye of the Story. We can talk about some points raised in today's discussion and next week as well. And next week, we can discuss elements of the review not cited in my remarks today. So I'll let Tom take over, and then I'll talk about some of the points that Miss Eudora found in her review, which I have to say kind of blew me away. So, Tom, what would you like to say about the novel?
Well, I'll say that, as you say, this is moving along in Macdonald's career. And at this point, Lou Archer has been a private detective for about 25 years. He started after World War II. He served in the Pacific, but before that, he'd been a policeman in Long Beach, and he didn't like the atmosphere there. After the war, he became a private detective. He had fantasies of becoming a successful Hollywood PI and being in the newspapers and so on, but that faded gradually. He was married, but his wife left him, and that's something that he still regrets and sort of mourns. And when we meet him in this book, he's living alone in an apartment in West Los Angeles. sort of near Century City. And immediately you get a sense of isolation and loneliness. And his room is rather shabby. His furniture is old. He's getting old. He's getting gray in his beard. His clothes are a little bit aged. And he's conveyed that he doesn't really have much of a social life. And in fact, these blue jays that come to his window every morning, loudly demanding food, which he throws peanuts to them, seem to be, his chief companions. And his family life, as it were, his social life, seems to come from his work. And immediately there's a little boy out in the courtyard who comes out to watch the birds too, courtyard of his apartment. And Archer's interest and affection, you might say, transfers from the birds immediately to this little guy who's timid, frightened, but appealing and in jeopardy. And you see his parents there who are separated, and the father is sort of a brutish, rough-tempered guy. And immediately Lou feels protective towards the kid. And he gradually gets drawn into this little severed family unit. At the same time, the first line of the book refers to this wind, this hot breeze that's coming in. And it's a subtle note, but this will become the Santa Ana wind that's fueling the fire up 90 miles away in Santa Teresa, as we say. And the closer, for reasons that will become apparent, he needs to visit the fire area. And the closer you get to the fire area, the more the weather intrudes and controls the narrative in a lot of ways. Oh, maybe that's enough for now.
Thank you. Sort of like a Shakespearean play, sort of like King Lear when the weather starts acting up, and then that lets you know what's going to happen.
And a little more specifically to the detective fiction genre, it's got to remind you of the Red Wind, where Philip Marlowe becomes involved in this sudden evening imbroglio on a night when Los Angeles is visited by the Santa Ana winds.
Great, thank you. That sets a good scene for us. As I said, Suzanne was kind enough to pull out some statements by Eudora, and I found them just so enlightening. Eudora and Ross Macdonald, Kenneth Miller, had not met when she wrote this review. This was not, if I remember correctly, she sent him a fan letter, which he didn't answer, and then later on mentioned that she'd sent him a fan letter, and then they became friends. But this is what she says about The Underground Man. This is a medieval tale of romance and the fairy. It is exactly what Archer plunges into when he enters the case, finding his way through their lives and fears into other people's obsessions and dreams. He might as well be in a fairy tale with them. Mm. The mystery has handed him what amounts to a set of impossible tasks. Find the door that opens the past, unravel the ever-tangling threads of time, rescue the stolen child from fleeing creatures who appear to be under a spell and who forbid him to speak to them. Meet danger from the aroused elements of fire and water, and beware the tower. But Archer's own role in their fairy tale is clear to him. From the time he fed the blue jays with the little boy, he never had a choice. Mm-hmm. There is the maze of the past to be entered and come out of alive, bringing the innocent to safety. And in the maze, there lives a monster. His name is murder. So what do y'all think about that? Does anybody want to comment on the first part? Go ahead, Tom.
Uh, I just wonder now, as you read that, if Eudora's take on this book as a fairy tale inspired Ken to write his next book, Sleeping Beauty, which has a lot of parallels to the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale.
Mhm.
And that's the book he dedicated to Eudora Welty. And I find that interesting, and I think that's relevant.
Looks
Thank
like
you, Tom. I'm seeing a hand from Jacob.
Hey, nice to see everybody again.
Mhm.
Um, I want to say something too. Just I love Welty's evocation of that. Number one, I mean, in the world of detective fiction, there's a reason why kind of the forefather for McDonald is Raymond Chandler, right? Who comes up with a detective that does the big sleep, and his detective's name is Marlowe. That he's kind of has this romance to him. He's very much a romantic figure, a knight in pursuit of um, oftentimes, people in distress. So I definitely hear that fairy tale, chivalric, medieval echo there. That on the flip side, if I were to counter Welty a little bit, this is also a deeply realistic story, especially the fire. I mean, one remarkable thing, a second wind to the novel is that there's a new kind of ecological reading of detective fiction recently that's taken a lot of extra wind to it, and this is very prophetic. I mean, you hear a lot of mentions in the book of places like the Palisades, which burnt down 2 or 3 years ago. So he is right on the money there. I mean, you read this book now in 2026, it has a intense realism to it that opens it up in a different way, I think.
course, now Tom can speak to this better than I, but Ross Macdonald in 1964 had faced the Coyote Fire in
Yes.
Santa Barbara and had gotten up on the roof of his house with a hose to prevent the fire, and his wife and dogs had to evacuate. He stayed put. So all of this is coming out of a very realistic experience, yeah, a real experience with fire.
Mhm. Yeah.
Tom, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah. Within the past year, I think Anthony Lane wrote a piece in the New Yorker, a long, terrific piece uh, about the underground man presaging, predicting, and describing the havoc from the more recent Palisades fire and all the fires that ignited Southern California. And that was a shot in the arm, I think, to people's awareness of this ecological mystery, as you might say, similar to the mystery that Ken wrote that involved a big oil spill in Santa Teresa, which
I see a
launched
hand
the
from
whole.
Pearl, Jane, and then Joellen.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I rue the fact that I have no idea about California geography and where these towns are and so on and so forth like that. I'm just not letting myself get too worried about that. I trust Lou to take me where he's supposed to go.
Mhm.
But I wonder, was Welty reading the previous 15 Lou Archer stories?
Mhm.
Secondly, where does this fall in the timeline for uh, Ross Macdonald and, well, actually for Ken Miller for the loss of his daughter and the raising of Jimmy, or the caretaking for Jimmy? Where does it fall in that? So those are my two questions.
Uh, Tom also can better answer, but the just before the book came out, Linda Miller died. Uh,
Okay.
and so I think the book had been completed, but he would have had a relationship with Jimmy, right, Tom?
Oh, sure. And yeah, they Ken and Maggie spent a lot of time with Jimmy and his father, who'd come up, I think, every weekend for a long time after Linda died.
But
And
he had essentially completed The Underground Man before Linda died, because that's when Eudora,
yeah,
he writes to Eudora that note, uh,
yeah.
and she's just received the request to review the book at the same time.
Mhm.
I think the day that he sent his corrected manuscript into Knopf, he heard that his daughter had died.
Oh, it's terrible.
Uh, as far as Miss Welty reading Ken's books, she read them all. She had read them all, and I think from the very first. He's
She
a big
she read them
fan.
during the war. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Great.
Right after the war. Yeah.
So it's possible that Ronnie, the little boy, is somewhat modeled on his
Ex completely,
Hmm.
completely, even to little bits of dialogue.
Right. There's a section in Meanwhile There Are Letters where Eudora praises, where he says, over to space control, something like that. And then Ken writes back and said, yeah, that's right from Jimmy. The language from Jimmy. Yeah.
Thank you, Pearl. Jane and then Joellen.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on the gentleman that commented previously about the novel being so rooted in realism. I have to agree with that. I think it was set in, well, when this came out was like 1971. And I just keep thinking of my own life back then at that time period and reading this novel, and it just dovetails. So the details just dovetail so nicely with that time period as I remember it. The way the people are dressed in the novel, the social mores between the men, the women in the novel, the talk about the young people um, making a break from their parents to live their own lives, the drug use, it just everything about it. I can't, this is the second time I've read this, and it's just such easy reading for me because it just seems so familiar.
Mhm. Well, if I may, uh, uh, Ken is cited as a novelist of perhaps the best novelist of the generation gap, one of the best. And there are specific remarks. There's a character says, "We're losing a whole generation."
Yeah.
He was, yeah, he was a keen observer of all of the things that you mentioned.
Thank you. And Joellen.
Yeah. I don't know whether Jane and I are about the same age, but I was thinking of Hunter Thompson's Fear and Loathing at times during this. And when we get to the center, when we really are immersed in all of that thematic material, I think we're going to have a whole lot more to say. But in terms of the lost generation, I want to note a couple of things that Ross Macdonald uses war imagery throughout this. You might remember the avocados were like green hand grenades.
Mhm.
There was, some of the flashes of the fire were like artillery flashes. He talks about foxholes, sentinel quails, supernatural landing crafts, um, a besieging army, a fire like a besieging army. And at the end, I think we're left with in the campfire area where he's already reset. He's been north. The structure of this is beautiful. He's been north, he's been back south. Now he's heading north again, and there's a kind of reset by chapter 16. But he ends up in that campfire area where he says it's a staging area just back of the lines in a major battle, which and I have not read Beyond the Center. I whipped through it early some years ago, but I don't remember it. But it sounds to me like there are major battles still coming. And correct me if I'm wrong, but
Well,
Eudora's review says these people live in prisons of the spirit and suffer there. The winding prison-like stairs that appear and reappear under Archer's hurrying feet in the course of the chase are like the repeated questionings that lead most often into some private hell. So she picked up on that vibe as well. War, prison.
I'll go back to the whole idea of fairy tale and myth, because I do think that's important. I agree about the realism, especially capturing that mood of the time and the ecological issues that are there, but also that sense that you're walking into a maze, you know, and the name Ariadne for the book, and the notion of Ariadne providing Theseus with the twine and the sword to kill the Minotaur into and Lou Archer wandering, you know, to the Topanga Canyon to the Palisades to down where the boathouse, the beach house is, and the boat is docked, and then back up into the mountains with the fire. All of that wandering around is pretty maze-like, I think. So I think what we have is something operating both as fairy tale and as realism.
All right.
Jacob?
Yeah, we're not just entering a maze, but we're entering a transforming maze. One thing that's remarkable about the fire is how it moves and it changes the landscape and it moves people around. It's a perfect cover for crimes to be committed because all of the bureaucracies and infrastructure of the city is obsessed with tending to the fire. A lot of times Archer is like trying to figure information out and he can't get a hold of anybody because they're on the move. They're on these they're moving through the woods and there's this very remarkable apocalyptic landscape changing, moving around. There's this great moment when he sees the house. A lot of this mystery, I think, revolves around the forest house, and there's the fire all around it. Again, very symbolic, I think, of these families that are falling apart, and Archer's heroic desire to go back into the house, enter the fire, as things transform and move all around him. So yeah.
No. Even covering the body back up so that when the forest ranger comes back to it and the police come back to it, whatever evidence will still be there because it would be destroyed in the fire. If they left poor Stanley there would be nothing left of him if the fire got to him.
That reflects a comment in the chat that Laura just left about the fire was started because of the murder of Stanley. So did want to mention that. And then I also see a hand from Pearl.
Yes, I just wanted to say also, Lou Archer also comments so often about the characters are imprisoned. So it's that each character he runs into, that he falls into as a part of this larger mystery and maze, that he talks about how he's imprisoned, whether by age or by the past or by, the search that is being made, that the characters are imprisoned also.
Yeah. Eudora also writes about the fire, since we are talking about that. Indeed, the fire is a multiple and accumulating identity with a character of its own, a super character that has earned itself a character's name, Rattlesnake. Significantly, Archer says there was only one good thing about the fire. It made people talk about the things that really concerned them.
I see a hand from Bill, and I thought there was one from Joellen, but
Oh, wait.
Okay. So Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know. I forgot this was going to be held on today, so I got the book over the weekend and read the entire book. So if I go a little too far in the story, just stop me, Tom. You'll recognize easily if I go too far. I was pleasantly reminded of Ken's love of birds. There are so many mentions of so many different species, very specifically, from the first, I threw a peanut, which he caught. And then after that, quite a few others. Some he caught and some fell in the grass. The jays were all around him like chunks of broken sky. I like that imagery, And then wherever, just the grandmother's house, which has all those, those stuffed birds throughout it, and how they're decaying, the stuffed birds in this decaying house, in this decaying land, which was very interesting. He doesn't waste much. He gives us description of the father. He was puffing rapidly on a thin brown cigarillo. So you would think that would be a throwaway line, but then it comes back later as very significant. So each one of these chapters, they end as if they're separate scenes. You can almost see how somebody could just stage this as a movie, And then to the comments about, I was brought back to electric Kool-Aid acid test, and and then Ken Millar, as he would have been older than my father at this point, I think. And so here's this view of this generation that mine, I'll add, and most of yours. I think Jacob gets to pass on that one, but and Anna, I think, does too. But he's talking about our generation and what's to become of us, so to speak. And what's become of us? We're fans of Ross Macdonald and Eudora Welty. So that's what became of us with all this. So it's a good novel. I enjoyed it. And the fairy tale quality of it. And I had forgotten that this is how Eudora Welty and Ken Millar met, through her review of this. It brought me back to thinking about her great fairy tale, probably one of the best, The Robber Bridegroom. Mm-hmm. And just a different tone she took with that than Ross Macdonald took with this. So.
Thank you, Bill. And Jane, I see your hand.
Okay, I have a question for Tom. These are the only two novels of Ross Macdonald that I've read, The Sleeping Beauty and The Underground Man, and I hope to read more. But I have a question that the Jays came in the first chapter, and then I think it was again in chapter 16, yes, when he's awoken from his dream. But are the Jays symbolic in any sense in Ken Millar's writing? Do they occur in other books, or do they have any symbolic significance for this book? Just wondering.
Well, I think just birds in general are throughout all the books, and as a symbol, if you want, of recurring life. And there's a wonderful remark in one of the books, which I think Miss Welty remarked on specifically, where Archer notes that and he sees a bird land and then another bird take off, I think. And he turns it into a notion of a sort of rule of the universe, if you will, that something has to be in the air. At least one thing has to be in the air at all times. So it's kind of an image, or if you will, or a metaphor of a life for him, I think, just like all living things are. But birds especially meant a lot to him, and he had a lot to do with the preservation.
Mrs. Armistead loves the quail. I thought that was also interesting. So, and she's been feeding the quail, and the quail are endangered by the fire. And the jays are, sort of raucous and aggressive little birds. But even those birds are embraced by Archer.
No. Shall we talk a little about the structure of the novel?
Why not?
Since Suzanne has very carefully identified, she says, how does this novel seem to be both typical of its mystery genre and divergent from it? The Britannica states that the traditional elements of a detective story are seemingly perfect crime, wrongly accused suspect at whom circumstantial evidence points, the bungling of dim-witted police, the greater powers of observation and superior mind of the detective, and the startling and unexpected denouement in which the detective reveals how the identity of the culprit was ascertained. Detective stories frequently operate on the principle that superficially convincing evidence is ultimately irrelevant. Usually it's also axiomatic that the clues from which a logical solution to the problem can be reached be fairly presented to the reader at exactly the same time that the sleuth receives them. And the sleuth deduced the solution to a puzzle from a logical interpretation of those clues. I guess we're not supposed to have red herrings and that sort of thing as well. Traditional mystery is, in a sense, reassuring. The guilty are found, no longer a threat. Logic reveals all. The mystery is solved. So far, would you consider this to be a regular traditional mystery?
I think Joellen has had her hand up for a time, maybe wanted to say something.
I can
Okay.
circle back to what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I think that a lot of those details, I mean, you can find so-called cozy mysteries that can get pretty hardcore, have violence in them, etc. I think there's a whole lot of more generic mix-up than is often commented on. What I was going to talk about in part, though, was aside from genre, the literary qualities and tracking this book that way. So go ahead, anyone.
Jacob.
I see Jacob and see Bill.
You know what reading this, what I find very unique about Archer is his incredible, almost like uh spooky calmness. There's a his emotional intelligence. Well, in a lot of detective stories, you think of the cozy mysteries, you think of Poirot, or you think of Marlowe in the hard-boiled school and Sam Spade. There's a kind of showiness to them. There's a quirkiness. These are truly characters, and only them are capable of solving these inexplicable mysteries. Something about Archer, he's so almost this. Forgive me for saying this, but there's a kind of feminine calmness to him. He speaks to women well. He doesn't speak down to them. He has this ability to kind of get information from people, not from muscling them, not from threatening them, but just speaking to them. So his ability to listen to people, ask questions, put things together in almost a prosaic way. It's not showy, it's not flashy. Uh, and I that really strikes me. And I sense that also in the structure of the book. Like all the chapters, I've been looking for any type of breaks. Every chapter moves from the beginning of the chapter to the end. There's no moving around. There's no weird moving around of the chronology. We're feeling something move from beginning to end in this kind of inexorable way. But again, the main thread that moves through the maze is his persistent calmness in the face of collapse and crisis and disaster. That's what I find unique about it.
Bill, and then I see Joellen and Pearl.
In terms of those rules, I would say if those rules had to be mandatory, then with the exception of Lou Archer having phenomenal skills at being able to put things together, Ken Millar, Ross Macdonald violated all those rules. The police are not presented as bumbling; they're presented as pretty much overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The gentleman who's the fire inspector, he seemed pretty sharp, but he had a lot on his hands. How he traced that cigarilla to being the cause of the overall fire, who knows? It's immaterial. He's there, and there's the answer. And so there's a lot of things that presented themselves, but he did not know beforehand. That's the thing about as far as I can tell. I don't read that many mystery novels, but he didn't know beforehand what took place. He didn't have any kind of prescient knowledge about this stuff. And I agree with what Jacob said. He seemed fairly calm. I don't know when he gets, say, struck on the head. I don't know if that happens before chapter 17.
Before.
Yes.
Okay, so he didn't seem like he held a lot of grudges against the people that were misleading him or anything else. So, yeah, he was pretty calm, and as were some of the others in here too. And you could almost tell who was lying, and he would circle back to him over and over and over again. So there were some red herrings in the entire novel. I will just say that. I guessed many times wrong, let's just say, with the same information that he had.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good.
Thank you, Bill. I see Joellen and Pearl still.
So many things. At one point, Archer calls himself a catalyst for trouble. And that he is always ready to block a punch, to do something. When he got hit over the head, that was the anomaly probably. He also has great respect. He reads people very well. And he's astonished by how well the real estate developer, Brian Kilpatrick, can read people and in fact reads him. He says something like, and except that one thing he didn't know was that they were both middle-aging men. And this is toward the center. It's kind of a structural statement there, but it's gorgeous. The welter of details that we go through are organized very carefully. Almost every car that's mentioned, and there are a lot,
Mhm.
different color, or there's something defining it, a jalopy. We know it was the jalopy that was found. We don't have to scratch our heads. The houses, we move through cars, we move through houses that are connected to people. One is like a Greek temple, and I think that's Mrs. Armistead in a grove of cypress. They're distinctive, and he uses colors. The blue, and I love that Bill read that when the little boy in the blue suit in chapter 1 has the blues around the J's around his feet, it looked like chunks of broken sky. But also, when Archer goes back home in chapter 16, he sees the J's, he throws peanuts on the ground, and he says they were like a flashing blue explosive in reverse that put the moving world together again. And so we're starting back from somewhere back into the novel. And pieces. He tells what's her name? Jean Broadhurst, just give me pieces. And that word comes out throughout until we hear in chapter 16 that he's feeling better about the whole thing, but the central piece was missing. I mean, there's so many literary ways and things to follow through this text, from these images to keep track of characters. I mean, Eudora Welty, think of Losing Battles, is to introduce us in very careful ways to meet all these characters, and that's what he does here through all of these chapters and novels, taking us down into the center.
Beyond,
Dig our ways out.
So your point is that he has moved beyond genre fiction in terms of this.
I don't buy the whole hard borders period. There's bad genre fiction, there's bad literary fiction. Yes, I think that, I mean, if you want to get technical, I think that the Ross Macdonald that I'm reading here, I haven't read a lot of him, but is a little more hard-boiled than I call noir, which sometimes has a campy sense to it. And he basically writes, I mean, and plus, I mean, probably almost all. Anyway, he writes puzzle mysteries, if you want to put it that way. He writes about these pieces that need to be placed. The central one is missing. So there's definitely a puzzle that we're following through here. That's the best, like the best of the puzzle writers. So I think there's a whole lot mixed up in talking about genres in too hardcore a way.
So did Ross Macdonald, so did Eudora Welty.
Yeah. Well, we got all these different groups of characters too. It reminded me a little bit of reading a Dickens novel where everybody's going to come together at the end, but it's going to take you a long time to get there. Luckily, this book is not as long as Dickens. So we'll find out how that first group of Jean, Stanley, Ronnie, the 17 or 18-year-old girl, and Ms. Broadhurst connect to Al and Elegance and the Star Motel, how they connect to Fritz Snow and his mother. And then we got the fire, and we've got the Armisteads, and we've got Brian Kilpatrick, and we've got the Crandalls. And somehow they're all going to come together in this really relatively short book.
I think Pearl has something here.
Thank you, Pearl.
wait for that review of all those characters that I resisted writing down. And I thought, okay, I'll just go with the flow. I'll just get it into the maze. The characteristic of Lou Archer that I would add to Jacob's initial summary of his, and what I've most felt makes him different from other detectives or private detectives, is his vulnerability. He admits his vulnerability, both in what he doesn't know, but that he's tired, that his head does hurt, that he's aging, that he also is lonely, that his wife also left him and divorced him, and that vulnerability of I think is somewhat unusual, and also in very more current detective type things, he doesn't specify what he's eating. You know how a lot of the detectives always go for the sandwich or something, you know, and Lou Archer, we don't. Finally, he gets a hamburger. That's his vulnerability is what really struck me. And always when I was reading all of the books that Welty reviewed, I'm trying to think, well, what did Welty see in here? What did she like? And of course, she does that so beautifully in this review. But so much reading this in the last day, I was struck with so many beautiful, descriptive, metaphoric statements about characters, especially, but also about place, that I thought, oh, Welty would have loved that. That's what attracted her, was the beautiful language that Ken Miller, Ross Macdonald is employing to describe these things, and his keen reading of people. It's more than just being a detective; it's understanding the people. I felt. That's all.
Thank you, Pearl. I saw Tom raise his hand, but I also see Laura, Jane, and Bill. So let's start with Tom, and then we'll jump to Laura.
Sorry. Well, and just a quick thing about as far as eating. There's one point where he realizes he hasn't eaten all day, and so which is an example of how caught up he is in the case. But also, it may be an example of his fraying memory and Ken's fraying memory, which would speak to also to his vulnerability and aging and so on.
Thank you, Laura.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking when Pearl was talking about the beautiful imagery, I did jot down one of the lines that was the heart has its reasons that reason does not know. Thought there were just some really incredible lines. But thinking of like the puzzle, I had never heard that about puzzle mysteries. So I really that was helpful, Joellen, because I due to time limits have been listening to this as an audiobook. And the number of times that I would come home from my morning walk and just sit at the breakfast table and stare into nothingness, trying to figure out what I had just listened. I needed to write it down, but I also did the same thing where I resisted that and just listened to it all the way through, because I kind of enjoyed that like trying to put the puzzle together in my head. I found that so much more of a challenge listening to it. So I was just curious if anybody else listened to it versus read it.
Didn't.
All right, thank you, Laura. And if anybody wants to pop in the chat about whether you're listening to, please do. I would love to give it a listen. If we could hear from Jane, and then I see Bill's hand as well.
Okay, well, mine is, I have just an observation to make. Back in the 70s, we used to love to watch the Rockford Files. And I'm telling you, as I'm reading this, I'm seeing Lou Archer as kind of a Rockford character. Pearl mentioned his vulnerability, and that was the word I was trying to hit on, where this guy, Lou Archer, is confronted by all of these pieces, as you call them, and different people that he's meeting, and it takes him into so many different situations with so many varied people. It's kind of hard to keep track of all the people, but I couldn't help but likening Lou Archer in this to somewhat to James Rockford.
Norman, Oklahoma's own James Garner.
Do y'all want to talk about character development any? Do you think all of these characters are round, or are they some of them flat, or
I think
Suzanne?
Bill had something, and then I'll
Oh,
follow.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I would add that I don't know about the vulnerability, but I think he was open and he wasn't threatening per se, Lou Archer. I didn't see a reference to him carrying a gun anywhere, so whatever, authority he was drawing from was coming out of his own personality and character. And some of the writing, again, I thought was really, really good. I don't have the pagination. I just have a Kindle version. It's in chapter 8. That's when he first goes into Fritz's room. And the last sentence of the preceding paragraph starts, "The air in the room smelled sweet and rotten. All I could see at first were the narrow shafts of sunlight that came through the holes in the blind drawn over the window. They were thrust across the room like the swords of a magician probing a basket to demonstrate that his partner had disappeared. As if he would like to disappear indeed, the gardener crouched in the corner of the iron bed with his feet pulled up under him." And I thought, wow, that really captures Fritz,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say about Lou Archer is that, and I think this goes to the kind of transcending the stereotypical limits of genre fiction, that Lou Archer sees these people as people. So it would be easy to dismiss somebody like Armistead. But then Armistead tells him, what Jerry reminds me of the way I was when I was a young man and just wanted to be out on the ocean all the time. And I took him in as a kind of maybe a son, a younger brother. And here's this character who could easily remain two-dimensional that Archer gives us some depth to. And Mrs. Armistead is the same way. And Jean, who could turn out to be just the, sweetness and light, has also let her son go off with Stanley because she wants money from Mrs. Broadhurst. I mean, so there's that complexity too. So that it seems to me Lou Archer and his creator, Ross Macdonald, are looking for that kind of mystery and complexity and unpredictability and depth that we find in real life and that can add into the novel.
Yeah. And Jean is not nearly upset enough that her son has not only disappeared with his father and a strange woman, but then the father turns up dead. And the strange woman, whom we don't know much about, has her son. And I was, I just thought what I would be doing, and it would not be what she's doing.
See Joellen and Jacob.
There are just echoes of Hemingway here. And Jane, we've talked about The Lost Generation, which in chapter 16, Brian Kilpatrick, who seems clueless sometimes, puts his finger on. And basically when Archer goes back then to talk to Armistead on the dock, Armistead says, Jerry needed a place, even though I knew he was taking drugs, a place in the scheme of things. And that certainly rings a clean, well-lighted place for me. And the Lost Generation of Hemingway in the 20s. But I also want to say a couple more things about what Jane has raised. In fact, it can link in what Jacob said about eco-criticism and eco-readings. I think the first Earth Day was in 1971. Oh, wow. And that came out of all of the ecological movements from the 1960s. There were so many movements going on. But I mentioned Hunter Thompson earlier, and both from those chapters on the Kilpatricks and the Crandalls, we get just such a picture of parents, lost children, and the lost world. One other quote from Archer in chapter 16, I think it is, that with one piece missing, the whole thing has come loose and was running wild. And that's that's the situation we've read to in the center. But I can tell you that I mean, I don't know how many people are as old as I am. I'll be 79 in late October. I was kind of youngish, graduating from high school, but I was teaching in a high school in Iowa in 1971. And it was about a year or two behind what was happening in California. But in 72, 73, there were the same kids that are being pictured here. The drugs, parents, everything falling apart. And Macdonald just captures that whole world where kids joked about narcs in the halls in their coats with white walls around their ears. And the high school yearbook that year captured that whole year beautifully. It had a 2-page spread of kids on a sit-in outside the principal's office, flipping the bird to the camera and smoking a joint. And 1 page of the yearbook staff was set in the cemetery with silhouettes holding umbrellas over gravestones, and they say PEP and all of that kind of thing on it. So, I mean, I just wanted a testimonial here. He captured the perfectly.
Great.
Thank you, Joellen. Jacob?
Just to go back to the comment on are all the characters round and flat, there are moments in the book that could have been absolute throwaways. There's a passage in chapter 13 when Archer's reading some of the documents of Stanley, and he finds a letter from a reverend. And the reverend says something that almost sounds like deeply an antidote to his sadness looking for his dad. He says something like, the past can do very little for us, no more than it has already done, for good or ill, except in the end to release us. We must seek and accept release and give release. And reading that over, and I just had this feeling of, while I was reading this book, this is not a thrill-seeking book while I was reading it. The overarching tone is a kind of sadness. And I had this, I've heard this is an argument often made that one remarkable element about a detective in detective fiction is that he is always in a state of failure. He's always one step behind. You don't need a detective until you have a crime already committed, and you can't, reverse the crime. So I think Archer is the kind of detective that is aware of the futility of his job. These are people who are already in the midst of obliterating kind of situations. I mean, people are dying all around him. He's not going to fix that. He's not going to fix the trauma committed to this child. He wants to save Ronnie, but the damage is being done. And I think Archer is aware of that. So many of these people, they're not necessarily going to be saved. And that's the sadness I feel when I read this. But yeah.
Thank you. And Bill?
Yeah, I think it was who was it that raised the issue about food? Was it I don't remember. Yeah, that's Virginia, I think. I can't see your name because it's covered up right now. But beginning at chapter 9, of all people, to show kindness, to Ronnie, the little boy, it's Fritz. So around noon or a little later, I was eating my lunch. That's Fritz. Lou says, what did she say? She said Ronnie was hungry. I gave him a half of a peanut butter sandwich. I gave her the other half. Mm-hmm. And so Fritz gets rounded over and over a little bit as you go through this. And so he's showing kindness to the child. It's hard to see anybody else really taking a lot of interest in the child as they go along. But anyway, I think in terms of trauma theory, before it became a big deal, it was not a big deal in 71. They did not talked about shell shock and that kind of thing. And they started inventing post-traumatic stress disorder after that. Lou Archer had a sixth sense about the effects of trauma. And you'll see that as it develops. So it's pretty interesting to see, that from that perspective, historical perspective.
I was reminded with what Joe Ellen said in 1971. I was a junior at Millsaps, and my brother graduated from MC that December. And I mean, it was MC, so you weren't going to be wild and crazy with long hair or anything like that anyway. But my parents took my brother to Dennery's to eat, and my brother's hair was over his collar. Now, it wasn't long. He wasn't a hippie. And my daddy probably wouldn't have liked it if he had been. But Dennery's would not serve him because his hair was over his collar. And I cannot tell you how mad my daddy was about that. I mean, he had just graduated from college, he had a job, but they were worried about his hair. So these parents that we see who don't quite know what to do with their kids, I guess I could say on the good side that what my daddy did with his kid was support him, and then probably when we got home said, "You want to trim your hair a little bit before you start your job."
You know, Beverly, Eudora had the same experience at dinner.
Ah,
She took Daniel Aaron's son,
mm-hmm.
and he had long hair, and they were turned away too. She was furious. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So does anybody want to have the last word here? We're down to about 4 minutes.
Oh, may I say something?
Yes, yes, please.
I don't know about the last word, but a couple of points. As far as keeping in touch, Ken keeping in touch with what was going on with the younger people and so on. He lived in Santa Barbara, which was the site of the burning of a Bank of America, which was in Isla Vista, nearby suburb college town. And this became the longest trial in, I think, California state history. There were like 17 defendants. I knew one of them. And it just lasted for months and months and months and months. And Ken, who is a courtroom devotee, as was Maggie, went to that trial every single day and became acquainted with the lawyers, became acquainted with the defendants. And it's an instance of his reportage with itness. As far as the traditional detective story and how do his books differ from them, it's true that the case is solved here in this book and in others, but it's not really. I mean, everything else is sort of in chaos and disarray, as has been noted. So life goes on in its messy way, even after the culprit has been identified, culprits. And he wrote the books not knowing often, not deciding who would be the culprit, so that all of these people could be culpable, in some manner or other. Dickens, by the way, was his first crucial influence. As a kid, he read, I think it was David Copperfield, and just consumed it, became obsessed with it, and decided that that's the kind of writer he wanted to be, somebody who was realistic and appealed to common people, then, as it were, and anybody could read and enjoy. That's all. Thank you.
I had one thing, Tom, and Ken, I think, said that he thought the greatest mystery writer of all time was Dostoevsky.
Yes.
So that's his concept of sort of not being confined by the conventions of a genre. Yeah.
That trumps Wilkie Collins.
I see a hand from Joe Ellen, and that might be our last word.
Just a quick note. I want to circle back to the issue that Jacob raised at the beginning with ecological criticism. In both this book, and the next one, you have ecological disasters. And we haven't mentioned green mansions, just something you might look up.
Good.
before we finish the book. It's a 1904 book, and it had a history again in the late 60s and early 70s regarding its subject matter. It's one of those, the green book, the blue address book. We haven't talked about the blonde much, but she had a red address book, but this one's green, I think, for a reason.
Mhm.
And he
More
carries it in his
details.
pocket and it gets mentioned all the time. So it's
Yep.
you need to pay attention. Yeah.
Mhm. That's true.
Well,
Good.
Suzanne, Beverly, or Tom, do you guys have anything else to add before we close out for the day?
No, but I will mention something that I think maybe we can talk about when we finish the whole book. I wondered how many of you could hear Ross Macdonald's voice, Kenneth Miller's voice in Lou Archer, since this is a first person narrative. Now, of course, we know the narrator isn't the author, but I kept looking for the voice that I heard in the letters between Eudora and Kenneth Miller. And I wondered about whether or not y'all heard any similarities as well. But we can talk about that next time.
And I'll add to that, Beverly, that I think Anna's going to send you a link to an essay by Ross Macdonald called The Writer as Detective Hero.
Great.
Yes. So in the newsletter this week, in addition to the recording, I will be sending the New York Times link to Eudora's review of The Underground Man, as well as a pretty clean link to the essay, The Writer is Detective Hero by Ross Macdonald.
Right.
So keep an eye out for that, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again next week when we finish the book. Thank you, guys.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Great session.
Thank you,